It's been a fantastic month for us here on the network, so I'd like to thank everybody who has gone to patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv and help support us. Makes us feel really great. Now onto the show.
My name is Gary Butterfield.
My name is Cole Ross.
And you're listening to Watch Out for Fireballs. It is a Games Club podcast.
And you're listening to the Dispatch episode for May of 2019. These are the episodes where we take your prompts and questions from Patreon, do a longer topic discussion, and then read your responses to the games we covered in this month. It's been a great month.
Yeah. Good month.
Yeah.
Great month. Good month, great month.
Yeah, no, lots of fun games, and the Patreon is doing fantastic. So thank you at the start.
Yeah, we really do appreciate it. So let's go ahead and get started.
Yeah,
here. So I've got a quick one, a quick easy one.
Okay.
Because there are a couple of people who have asked things along this line.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of these things that's going to feel a little bit like a cop out, but I just want to get out there because it's the honest answer.
Mm-hmm.
So Kyle Sirk asked this question. A couple of people asked variations of this.
Mm-hmm.
How do you envision gaming consoles changing in the future? This generation has seen some major shakeups to the usual console cycle with the ultra adaptable Switch, the rise of digital over physical games, and the half-step pro versions of consoles partway through the generation. What do you predict the future of consoles going forward are? And there are a couple of questions that are about kind of the trajectory of the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Things. And I risk this coming off like a cop out, and I appreciate asking.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's worth interrogating the question because sometimes it's hard to tell if the question is what would you like to see, or what do you think will happen? And the difference between those is probably where my cynicism about the big money side of this is always at.
Yeah,
will come out. That's where that cynicism will come out. So I don't know if if that would be satisfying to hear.
Yeah, and there will probably be streaming games will become a thing, rather than having them on hard drives.
Yeah.
There will be general advances in graphics. I think the same way that old games look archaic now.
Mm-hmm.
In games that look realistic now, I think that will continue to shift.
I think that there will probably be some embarrassing and poorly considered follows to what Nintendo did with the Switch, probably.
Yeah, probably from Nintendo, because no one else really does risks,
right,
like that. That's just Nintendo. So Nintendo's due for they're one on, one off kind of failure success rate.
Yeah.
And that is one of the reasons why this question is something that I kind of have to throw my hands up a little bit. Is I have always in my second adult phase, my first gaming phase, as a pupil gamer, I was pretty invested in the console wars and read magazines about oh man, this Genesis owns, but Super Nintendo is coming and that's gonna be fucking cool, and just looked at screenshots and stuff. And now the way I play games, I talk about the pie a lot, how big the hobby is and how many games there are. I just don't engage in that way at all.
No.
I still play a lot of old games, a lot of games that are new to me that are upwards of 5 years ago still look good and feel pretty good to me. I'm not really up on new releases except outside of a couple of boutique devs who put out things. And I just don't get really excited about system stuff like the Switch, which I love. The reason why I love the Switch is because it's a big handheld that anonymously feels comfortable to me. It doesn't feel comfortable as a handheld to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Feels great to me, and they put a lot of games on it.
Yeah.
But the core functionality of the Switch of popping into my TV, I haven't docked my Switch since the first week I had it.
Right.
it's just a Game Boy to me. That is Game Boy to me.
Yes, it is Game Boy.
Is how I feel about it.
I mean, to expand beyond that, like, I love the Switch because it is the heir apparent to the Vita, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's just a handheld to me. So like kind of this thing that is the innovative thing about the Switch doesn't matter to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's more about how I play games than the actual industry itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just kind of not a good person to ask about it.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm probably a little bit more plugged in, but like even the announcements about, you know, the notional PlayStation 5 that they put out, it's like, oh yeah, more pixels, cool.
Yeah,
like that's just expected. It's a little bit like when Apple comes out and says it is our fastest iPhone ever. Well, I fucking hope so.
Yeah. This one's a little bit slower than the last one, but hold on, we got something we're calling Culture Press.
Yeah.
Like we have something we're gonna call Pixel Time. And when you go into Pixel Time, you know, it's just some kind of, if you hold this button and press it a little bit harder, this barely usable feature shows up. Yeah, it's $1,000. Go fuck yourself, or Apple.
Yeah. So yeah, it's hard. Prognostication is hard. If I and like there's enough runway for this that you could probably go back 5, you know, maybe even 10 years on some of my earlier, you know, like Stand Under the Don't Tree and Riddle Me This type stuff. Like you could go back that far and hear ridiculous predictions. It's just you know, it's just not. It's not what I'm into.
The Prediculous. That's what that segment should be called. Yes. But like one aspect of it too is that I am always more interested in games than I am the hardware. I understand they drive each other, but the fact that the pie is so big and that indie games are so big, I anticipate a future in which at least half of my favorite games, if not more, are things that can be played on anything.
Yeah.
Basically, you know, like my most played games by hour are all Isaac and Gungeon and Into the Breach and small indie games that are not graphical powerhouses and have no place on the PlayStation 5.
Yeah.
You know, none of the features of this thing, you know, we talked a lot about like diminishing returns. And I think that's a real thing. Like we'll never get there. Like Rosino is paradoxing terminal velocity, you know, of that stuff. And as we have increasingly incremental changes, yes, they can matter. Right, like you look at like a current generation game that has a lot more characters on the screen, that can matter. Does it matter as much as like smooth scrolling did when Mario came out? Right, like that was a huge sea change that changed every aspect of a game. Now we are getting smaller games where it's like, oh, we can have a slightly more crowded scene. You know, does it matter? Yes. Does it matter as much? Not in any universe. You know? Right. As we get closer to that, doesn't matter as much, and that gets smaller and smaller. I just get more and more unplugged of, you know, of those differences and will just chase games.
Yeah. It's really hard to get a nut up looking at like the potential stuff that's coming out and saying, yes, I will buy this machine for that.
Yes.
Yeah. It doesn't drive my purchase anymore. You know, like I really only got a PS4 when I did because of Bloodborne. I probably would have gotten it later, but
and that's why I'll get a PS5.
Right.
Is like whatever FromSoft game comes out for it, because otherwise it'll probably play on my PC. My PC is rather old now, but still plays everything pretty well. And if it doesn't, I'll get a new one, and there'll be one investment every 5 years. And you know, it's a-okay. So this is kind of a blanket address to a couple questions about predicting the future of the industry. I don't want to discourage anybody from asking us anything. It's just that's kind of my stock answer to questions of that stripe.
Yeah. So I'm going to go here for another game question. Justin writes, regarding mobile gaming, iOS in particular, do you think the regrettable state of games on that medium is 1, the result of the mobile touchscreen medium itself, 2, the way Apple manages the App Store and promotes content, or 3, the fact that iOS apps basically die if they are not updated annually, or some other factor?
All three of those things suck.
Yeah, no. So one, the touch screen makes it incredibly hard to make certain kinds of games. You know, 2,
and easy to make other ones. You know, like so their game. We've talked about that a lot. Like if a game is designed for the interface, it's always going to be a lot better. You know?
And I think 2 and 3 are kind of related in regards to Apple's heavy hand on the editorial side, you know, marketing stuff. That said, I do, you know, about once a week, just open up the App Store on my iPad and say, what's new today? which is, just a way to find new stuff when people that I listen to aren't talking about those things. But I think that in general, the sorry state of everything can all be brought back to the business. You can blame it on the business, which I am super happy to do.
Business in terms of how Apple handles it, and then also, and not to be like gamers 4,776 and 77 complaining about microtransactions, but like that is a thing, right? It is. I don't buy iOS games that are free.
Yeah.
Ever. Like obviously, I know there's a tautology there, but like I don't download iOS games that are free ever because I just don't trust them, and I know that they can be done well. I'll hear somebody be like, "Oh, it's actually good." And
it really takes a pretty strong vouch for me to take that leap.
Because I don't. There are a few of them that I do, but only when they're absolutely remarkable. And when somebody damns something with faint praise of being that part of it's not so bad. And it's like, well, yeah, but what if I just play this other game instead? It's all about that pie being so big.
Yeah.
There's a curation thing with the iOS store too. Like I open it about once a week and flip through things. And it's just there are a lot of games that I've downloaded that have held my attention for like, an hour or so over 3 sessions.
Right.
And that's all I got out of them. And I have this weird sense of just like, well, those are still there. Like I haven't finished my vegetables. I can't order more vegetables yet. And there are just so many vegetables here.
Yeah.
Like here's an array of thousands and thousands and thousands of vegetables. Like, so
related to the free to play thing or the in-app purchases or whatever, twisted incentives result in non-optimal results. Across the board, that is just a fact of life. It's a fact of business, and it can make entire swaths, entire marketplaces just dog shit. That is really hard to wade through. Yeah.
So thank you, Justin. Here's a question from Adam. Adam says, my wife and I have a tradition with From Software games. We spend a bunch of time in the character creation and make King Penelope, the eternal character who jumps from game to game. With Sekiro, it has a fixed character, so we don't get to have that fun. And thus far, nothing has been in the game that wouldn't have worked if the game did allow a custom character appearance and fashion souls. How much value do you guys put on the ability to make custom characters in your games? Is it just a novelty, or is it something that actually increases your enjoyment? For me, it is somewhere between those two things. Like I wouldn't say just a novelty, but it's also not something I seek out as much as people who I know do. Like I like fashion souls. I like looking at Souls armor and stuff, but it's never a sub game to me to make the coolest looking dude.
Yeah, Fashion Souls appeals to me because not everybody here listens to Bonfireside Chat. Fashion Souls is just the aspect of playing Dark Souls or other FromSoft games where you try to find like the correct armor to put to make your character look cool as fuck.
Yeah.
For me, that aspect of the game works because it is another reward for exploring and finding stuff. Like a new set of armor, even if I don't have the stats for it, I will put it on because it is fun to see. It's fun to see the art, and oftentimes it's really goofy because those games are goofy.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I like it. I'll try stuff on when I get it, or I'll flip through the guide or flip through, a wiki and look at the different armor. I like it. It has never impacted my enjoyment when it's not there, and that's just kind of the truth. I understand that some of this can be related to issues of representation and such. Like people want to play a version of their character that looks like them. Not saying this is the right way to approach it, but I always, and this might just be the games that I kind of cut my teeth on. I tend to think of games as role-playing kind of things. Like when I sit down to play Deus Ex, I don't think like, hey, this is going to be, I'm going to create this JC Denton, but it doesn't have to be a Gary Butterfield.
Right.
Like I'm going to play this version of this character who in my mind, I'm role playing them as like somebody who goes crazy once he finds out Yunako betrays him. And then, no survivors. Right. And I'll do that kind of role playing experience, but it doesn't because, and largely because like a lot of game protagonists look like me. I don't have to try to make myself in the game. And I am okay just playing Corvo or just playing JC Denton or just playing Sekiro. I'm like, this is the story of this person and I'm controlling them and kind of making their decisions for them. That's very easy for me to internalize that. I recognize it's not the same for everyone, but that's my experience with that.
Yeah. For me, it's been a journey, Gary. No, it just
Yeah.
my
It's kind of beautiful.
kind of beautiful. No, my relationship with that aspect of games has changed over time. Just because of, a while back, like, let's say 2007, playing Mass Effect, I put a lot of time into designing my Shepherd, that I would carry forward, between those games. And in general, I would put time into like Bethesda character creators and stuff. Just I felt like I was getting less out of it as time has gone by. I don't know if it's because the fidelity got higher and higher and there were more sliders, and I didn't feel like putting the time into it. But, the returns were just diminished. So now what I tend to do is just pick a preset, alter it a little, and then go.
Yeah.
I'll
pay attention to hair.
Yes.
More than anything. And I'll give anyone who's able to have one a beard.
Yes.
And that's basically it. Like an exception would be like The Sims, where I do try to make myself in that. And I will spend a lot of time on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But, if it's a game where the character creation is a huge part of the fun, see Saints Row 2 through 4 or City of Heroes, Like I think that those are kind of notable exceptions for me.
Yeah. You want to design your superhero or what have you?
Yeah.
I definitely get into that for sure. But it's not something that does a lot for me, while recognizing that it does a lot for a lot of other people, and that's cool. Like I agree that Sekiro could have a custom design. Like, you could, so there are, I'm always gun shy about business considerations when talking about art. So like, yes, there'd be more VO if you allowed a gender swap, but I think that'd be money well spent. No reason why you couldn't have, a lady shinobi.
Other studios do it all the time.
Yeah, people do it all the time. Like, yes, it would be more expensive. I don't care about that when evaluating art.
Right.
Like, it's just whether this would be better. And I think it would be better. So I'm always happy to see it, even if I don't always engage with it, so.
Aaron writes, this is something you touch on briefly a lot, but how important are strict definitions of game genre, and what are useful ways and reasons to sort games into genres as opposed to ones that are unhelpful? Yeah. I don't necessarily I don't care. I'm not strict about it.
Yeah. It's useful in knowing like it's useful as a descriptor, and not necessarily as like a box to put something in.
Yeah. Descriptive versus prescriptive, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It is exclusively useful in your efficacy in describing something to somebody else. Yeah. And whether that is being directly like word of mouth, or whether you're reading about something and you want to know what kind of thing it is.
Yeah.
Really interestingly, I think that genre, some of those lines, one of the reasons they're blurring is because it's so easy to just see something now. Like, I will read about a game, but if I'm actually genuinely interested in it and I'm on the fence, I'll just watch the first 5 minutes on YouTube and see exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Rather than find words for it. So I think that's kind of blurred that line and made it a little bit less important. Yeah. Because even publications and such, they'll show a preview. You have like your Giant Bomb first looks and what have you. It's just here's what the game is. Look at it.
Yeah. It's also something where like a long time ago, it was just easier to tell at a glance what kind of game that was going to be. Like, oh, there's a gun at the bottom of the screen that's a Doom clone, right? We don't call them first person shooters because we don't have that word yet. Blocks are dropping from the top. Oh, that's a puzzle game. Like just because graphics were more limited, things just naturally sorted. Whereas now you can look at a still picture of something and say, all right, is that play or is that a cutscene? Not like in a Killzone 2, like, oh my God, the in-game graphics are just like cutscenes used to be. But just from like, no, like games tell stories differently now, or games, show stuff from perspectives that, kind of make it hard to discern at a glance. Right.
Yeah. And honestly, like those definitions, even in that respect, were of limited use.
Right.
We just didn't really think of it as such. So like you look at something like an obvious example with like a shooter is that, you see a gun at the bottom, that's a shooter. Doom is obviously super different from Deus Ex as far as genre, but it's also a totally different experience from playing something like GoldenEye, right? Where like the pace of play is like Doom is an arcade, like essentially a twin stick shooter, but from the first person without twin sticks. Whereas something like GoldenEye, there's more thoughtful, like there's a little bit more exploration involved and such. The pace of play is so different that even just calling them both shooters, even though they're both shooters, kind of does a disservice. Like it's a weird thing where genre is very useful as the absolute highest level way to look at something, but we're going to cover Into the Breach soon. And it's like, well, Into the Breach is a strategy game. Like, yeah, like it is a strategy game, but it's not like StarCraft, and it's not like XCOM, and it's not like any number of these things. Like turn-based strategy, it's not like Final Fantasy Tactics. Like saying this is a turn-based strategy is not good enough.
It only gets you so far.
Yeah. Yep, it does not get you very far. So if you're like, I hate strategy games, maybe you can use that as information. But even then, it's like, well, you might like Into the Breach because it's not like normal strategy games. Like you're not praying based on percentages to hit, like things like that. Like there's a lot of things that are different about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting. I think that they're very limited use, and can be useful as part of a much larger kind of paragraph about something if you're trying to describe it.
Yes. Where they become harmful is when it is used to gatekeep a particular example of a kind of game. Like, this game says it's X, but it's actually Y, and therefore not worth your time. Like,
who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, who even begins to care? Yep. Like it is kind of what it is. Like, if you feel like you got a false bill of goods, right? Like I got this because I picked up, No Man's Sky because I thought it was a hardcore like resource game, and it's actually much more about like lonely exploration.
Right.
Like that's one thing, but that just means you didn't read enough, because any paragraph, anyone who's writing about the game or talking about it will actually give you a more complete picture than just what it looks like.
Yeah.
So buyer beware. Ian says, I'd be curious about working conditions in game development. Games criticism rarely considers the conditions of making a game, possibly because games journalism also has terrible working conditions. There was a growing movement to factor in working conditions after Red Dead Redemption 2, and a fairly recent article about Anthem shows that people do care. I'd be curious as to what you think, or if you think that working conditions influence the evaluation of a game, which is a really fascinating question, because the Cyberpunk's going to come out. And it's the first one of those that I'm actually really super interested in. Yeah. Where it's like, yeah, this was apparently a real nightmare in the thing. And that's an interesting ethical question that I don't necessarily have a good answer to.
The verb evaluate makes it incredibly tricky, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we talk about business, like something I say a lot is that like business considerations are not something that you should consider when evaluating art. And I usually use that to frame like a game as being more generous to a score. Like somebody saying like, they couldn't have, or not generous, but something that can improve a game, like actually improve the product. So people say you couldn't add a difficulty selector to this because of the cost. And I'm saying the cost doesn't matter. I'm just saying it would be better with this. Like it's not my job to do the budget for this company. It's their job to make the game, and it's my job to say, to evaluate it, right?
Yeah.
And then this question's really interesting in that, because this is much more important than that. This is about, people's like lives being ruined and stuff like that.
Right.
But I can't shake like a feeling like, well, the artwork does stand as a thing. Like you have to talk about these things. It's very important to know about them, fight for them to be better. It just doesn't make the game worse though.
Right. And I think that, this is something that we hit on with the Witcher, and, I think that as a show and as a network, we have tried to call attention to this when it comes up in research about a game. Like we kind of ate the booger when it came to talking about Stalker, and the stories about the working conditions at that studio kind of didn't surface for either of us when it's apparently kind of infamous, right? We try and at least I, and I know you, want to call attention to this because it is worth at least mentioning it so people understand, and kind of consider it more. If you mention it enough, people will start kind of thinking about it. But at the end of the evaluation, it's like, okay, this is good. Was it worth those people? And however many lives are ruined, right?
Like the answer to that question, the reason why that's hard to talk about is the answer is always no.
Right.
Like my entertainment value is not more important than anyone's livelihood ever. Period. And it's just, the hard thing is once you kind of recognize that as a truth, you run into there's no ethical consumption kind of thing. Like there are degrees, of course, but everything you partake in, what, somebody was exploited in some way, most likely.
Yeah.
Or if not everything, at least one thing you partake in, somebody was treated like shit to make it.
Yeah.
Either now or historically. So there's a level of like cognitive dissonance that is necessary to be a media consumer in the world for that. For me, I think when it comes to what we do and evaluating games, the important thing is, and like you said, we missed this on Stalker just because we didn't read the right things, which is definitely our fault. I'm not shunting this. Part of it, though, is that it has not been as surfaced, right? Like this is a kind of a topic that I'm seeing a lot more about now than I ever did in my life.
Yeah, and I think that is the result of writers and of workers and people kind of.
It's basically Patrick Klepek.
It's basically
it's basically Patrick Klepek. So like, not to discount anybody else who's doing it, but that man is doing really great work on this specific thing, consistently.
I recall like back when you were, back in the early 2000s, reading about Electronic Arts widows, right? And reading about those lawsuits and, just kind of in the press, it was maybe even, like mocked a little bit or wasn't kind of described in a particularly helpful way. Since then, it feels like the barrier to the barrier to consideration for this is getting weaker in terms of like these stories feel more present when a game is released. And it feels like this topic is easier to bring up without an awful lot of onboarding necessary for the discussion. It feels like it is just something that there are people who are working hard to keep this in the news and kind of keep it in the discussion. And I think that is only good. And I think that there are also, like, you see something like, oh gosh, Slime Rancher, part of like something that I think is really cool about that is like they just said like, yeah, like we've made X amount of money on this game and nobody had, like, we never did crunch.
Yeah, everyone worked 40-hour weeks the entire time. Yeah, and that was our value.
Yeah,
and then you look at something like Scott Benson's like Game Collective they're making for their next game where they're like no bosses.
Right.
Like everybody there is just. And they're experimenting with it, and it's like it's going to work because it's not like the follow-up to Night in the Woods is going to be bad. And I think that kind of leading by example is really useful. Not that you should ignore or let developers off the hook for the things that are awful, but like it's an important part of the discussion.
Yeah.
Is this kind of like, here are the alternatives to it. Like the assumption that you have to work your force to death to make a game profitable was designed initially to exploit people, right? Yep. Like, anytime you have this is the only way things can be is this shitty way. That was something that was designed to fuck you over, and designed to fuck people over. Like, hey, guess what? If you hire more people, you wouldn't have to have them work 90 hours weeks. And the way you hire more people is the CEO gets less money.
Yep.
Done and done. Yep. The people, if they were not making wages that are unimaginable, then this problem would be solved.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So in terms of, I guess, evaluation of the game, I just think it's something that always deserves to be part of the conversation and mentioned, even if it does not reflect on the game. And that evaluation is separate from an individual's choice to buy it. Everybody draws their own line. Everyone makes their own compromises.
Yeah, you can decide what you're going to reward.
Yep. And decide what you're going to reluctantly reward. Right? Like something like Cyberpunk, like those dudes are douchebags. Like, I don't like the way that company is run. I'm probably going to play that game. It's just a compromise I'm choosing to make. I'm doing it with my eyes open and stuff. I know that it's, it's a ethically flawed thing to do. And I just know that going in.
Yeah. Speaking to our own project here, I am not interested in kind of having an inbuilt rebuttal to anything positive we say about Cyberpunk be rebutted with, but people were hurt making it.
Yeah. Like, they're two separate discussions.
Yeah.
Like the quality of the art itself is different. Like it just is different. I'm not saying that they have to be untied in your head. Like you can say, so you look at something like, and this kind of butts up against the other social stuff, right? So like you can say and be like, hey, I can't watch Annie Hall because that dude's a fucking creep. Right. And it grosses me out. The experience of watching it makes me feel gross. That's great. It makes me feel gross too. You can say, I don't want to give that guy money because supporting this monster feels awful to me. Yeah, that's true. I won't haven't seen a Woody Allen movie since I found out about all of his horse shit. Right.
Right.
I'm with you. It doesn't make Annie Hall a bad movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it doesn't actually change the art. So like when people say you have to separate the art from the artist, they're wrong. You don't have to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
You can have them together, but it is possible to evaluate art outside of that stuff. Whether it's like you should is a decision that like there's a lot of gray area on. You get to make that decision. People get to make that decision whether you should do it.
Mm-hmm.
But it is possible to do it.
Yeah.
You know, like before I knew any of that stuff, I liked Annie Hall. Like I liked that movie a whole lot. I watched it a bunch of times, and then I found out about the sex monster that made it, and now I don't watch it anymore because it feels grosser to me.
Mm-hmm.
Is that joy that I took in watching it before, is that somehow false? Like, do I have to turn those laughs into the bursar? You know, no, like I don't. Like that was actually just a thing that sprung from the art. It was produced by the art.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I just think it's a more interesting ethical question than a lot of people give it credit for. As a thing, it is not as simple as just like cancel the bad, celebrate the good. Like it can be if that's your thing, but that's not the only approach that I think is valid.
Yeah,
to it. And I say that as somebody who is not watching Woody Allen movies, who's not watching Louis C.K. specials, who's somewhat sensitive on the cancel button on this stuff. Like there's lots of people who I'm just like, this is gross. I'm not going to fucking engage with it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep. So no, I'm standard over here. Chinatown's still one of my favorite movies.
Yeah. You know, and it's like you can, it doesn't make it a bad movie. Mm-hmm. You know, it makes the decision whether to promote it or buy it or doing those things a little bit more fraught. Mm-hmm. But Chinatown isn't magically a bad movie because it was made by a shitty person.
Yeah.
You know,
so, you know,
and the same way, like Cyberpunk is like, I have almost more than anything else coming out in the future, have more faith that it is going to be an excellent video game.
Yeah.
It's just up to people who talk about that video game to acknowledge and shame. Like, and this is like a practical thing. Like this is quite literally, you know, people who are against this stuff, who don't want anyone to talk about it at all, are be like, oh, you're just trying to shame people. Yeah, they're trying to fucking shame people. Yeah. Like they're working, they're workers like shit. They're treating people like horse shit.
Right.
Like you should be shamed for that. We live in a society, assholes. Like we're better than that. We can do better than that. It is everyone's job to mention that and have it be a thing, but they're just unrelated axes. So
yeah, no, evaluate in context.
Yeah. God, that context is super fucking important.
Yeah.
So that would be my answer to that.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean like it's not this game gets one less letter grade because the developers were awful. Mm-hmm. You know, I think about that too. I've read like some things from people who worked on games where it's like, because like a lot of my Twitter timeline is games Twitter or game makers, and where they're just like, you know, I worked on this game. I don't want the game to be review bombed. Like, yes, they treated me like shit. I still put my heart and soul into it.
Right.
You know, it doesn't. You catch a lot of people in the crossfire when you're like this. You know, boycotts are great. Don't buy the things you feel uncomfortable buying. But being like this product is shit.
Yeah.
Because the people who way up at the top who make those decisions are unethical.
Right.
Like, you know, it takes, everything is so fucking complicated. It takes a lot of people to make the thing.
Yeah.
You know? So we have like, without naming, like there's somebody who listens to us who works on a company that had a major controversy about this.
Yeah.
You know, and like that person's not unproud of what they did, you know, even though like a lot of those stories are true.
Right.
You know, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Ethics.
they're really hard.
Check them out. Ethics. Check them out.
If you want to know more about ethics, go to your local library.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and we're not telling anybody what to be. That's just that's just our stance on it. My stance on it. So
yeah. Oh. We've been on game questions for a while. Do we want to go?
I was gonna say, yeah. Let's move on.
Yeah. Life questions. How about a few of these? So Lewis says, some just funnin'. What are some terrible personal flaws or quirks that you try your best to fix or acknowledge but won't quite just fuck off? For example, I find it almost impossible to text people back even though I know how easy it is and how shitty it can make people feel. I just find it so hard. So what about you? That's one.
Yes. I'm good at that stuff. Yeah. That's a personal strength. I pee on the entire toilet seat every time I pee. I do a full circle.
Good job, Dennis Leary.
Yeah, I do. Is that a nice lyric
It's a lyric in his song, I'm an asshole. I use public toilets and I piss on the seat. I walk around in summertime saying, how about this heat?
Okay. Yeah,
Because he's an asshole.
Yeah, babala. Or whatever that dude says. Ying-a-ding, babala.
I don't know
I pee on the whole thing is the difference for me. So if I ever find one of those toilet seats that's just shaped like a U, I don't pee there. I go to find a toilet where it's the entire ring, and then I hit all of it.
Do you get the bottom too? Like, you go around, you crimp, you lift, and then you hit the bottom?
Yep. And actually, here's a little secret. Handle. So because the thing about pee when as a male is that I can put it wherever I like.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to aim,
point and shoot,
and point and shoot. It's a first person spooter.
Yeah. I sleep too much. Yeah.
All of mine are like that I can think of immediately are similar to that. So I've actually been it's very hard for me to get in the habit of exercise. Like I've been over the last like 3 or 4 weeks, I've been making a conscious effort to improve my diet, and I've done actually kind of wonders with it. But getting in the habit of regular exercise is very difficult for me because I don't think it's fun. No matter what I do, and I've tried a lot of different things, they always feel like horrible chores that I just wish were over. And that's something I would love to fix, like make that fun for myself. That's very difficult. And then kind of socially, I don't know, I've got a couple like bad habits for things. Now that I'm an adult, I'm late a lot more often. And I didn't used to be, but now it's like, I don't know, I'm late. That's not great. So
whatever makes you personally angry about me.
Yeah, that's and also you capitulate too much. I'd say that about you. Here's my big one, and actually, I knew that there was something on the edge of my consciousness that is a good answer to this, and I was trying to think of it. I just thought of it. I and I've been way better about this, but I need to get offline more.
Oh yeah.
I'm like way too online. It's very hard for me to let people be wrong online. Like I will get irritated when I see somebody being wrong online. I will, and it will like legitimately bother me. And that's also something that's been like a goal for years of mine to stop that. And like, I've been making progress with it. I deleted that Curious Cat. Like I've been working on it. But the, kind of being online, opening myself up to kind of drive by nonsense from people and everything. Whereas in fact, instead of that, I could be offline with my friends.
Yeah.
Having, not that parasocial relationships aren't real, not that like online relationships aren't real or anything, but if I'm not getting a lot of joy out of whatever that thing is, why am I doing it when it's not additive nor fun? Yeah.
For anybody involved.
Totally. Like the people, the people, and we don't, I think that we sometimes get the illusion that we're constantly bombarded by that kind of stuff, and we're really not. It's just it feels like it is because we're sensitive. And in fact, like, if somebody's going to be like, hey, I'm mad that you guys charge money for the podcast now, here's a really mean review or whatever on iTunes I'm going to leave. I don't need to read that stuff. And I've been making, pains to like ignore that.
Yeah.
Like, I was talking to my girlfriend about it, and she's like, well, what do you get from that? What do you get from reading it? I'm like, well, when they're bad, I feel bad. And when they're good, I feel nothing. Right. Which is like a really simple kind of equation way to say like, hey, stop that.
Yeah.
So that's something that I'm actively in the process of, but has been a real journey.
Yeah. And it just falls under like it's a certain flavor or under the umbrella of like boundary setting almost.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very, very similar.
Honest answer for me that isn't, trivial or a joke. I'm indecisive, and that is the biggest driver of my procrastination. Not like, Cheaty and Agonia levels, but that is definitely a weakness that I wish I could shake, but I can't quite decide on the right way to do it.
Yeah. Yep. Tricky stuff.
Also I try too hard to make people like me,
but that's a hard one.
Yeah.
That's rough stuff.
Yeah.
Just to do a couple, we only have a couple life questions, but just to do them in pairs.
Yeah.
Shane McGray says, what are your opinions on beer? Here in New England, we're rich with craft breweries, but I'm not sure what your areas are like. Do you have favorite styles? What do you like, dislike about certain styles? Have you ever had a desire to brew your own?
I like beer. I'm pro beer.
Beer's good.
Yeah. So I think that I was about to say we are both in areas that are really good for craft beer, but I think that's just true across the country now.
It's a weird miracle.
Yeah.
Like I was in my hometown and you could buy like decent craft beer in the gas stations. And I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. You know, and like I'm between, so Cleveland not as it has a little bit of this. Cincinnati is a really big beer town. Like the good Cincinnati beers are distributed up here where I live now. And Columbus's brewery scene is getting good as well. So yeah, like it just our areas give us ready access to several different varieties. As far as styles, this is going to sound like a cop out. I'm literally omnivorous. I'll try anything as regards beers once, unless it is something that has like animal in it. At one point, I picked up a beer.
The Muppet?
The Muppet what?
The animal, the Muppet. You don't want like the
no. Do not dry hop with animal.
Yeah.
No. I only I only say that to disqualify. At one point back,
but do get yourself a nice cerveza with Anna Manuel.
Well, yes, of course.
Yeah, sorry.
No. At one point back when I was working at that studio and I was like, oh, we're going to provide beer because we're hip. I saw something that was like, it's called an oyster stout. And I was like, huh, that's weird. And I drank it and I was like, oh, this tastes kind of weird. And then I read the cocktail. I read the label and I was like, made with real oysters. And I just went and spat it out.
Yeah. Disgusting.
Really bad.
Out of control beer people.
Yeah. So like not literally anything, but like if there is a broad style of beer, I've probably tasted it and enjoyed it.
I really like beer. Part of my my recent like change in diet has been about trying to see if I can solve some of my gut mysteries. The worst Hardy Boys novel. And the one of the things I've done is stop drinking beer for that. And the other day at the Satanic Film Festival, I had a beer and it definitely like upset my gut stuff. So I think that I either maybe have some kind of like gluten sensitivity or just beer does something to me, or it's a mysterious third thing. So I haven't had beer in a while, and it kind of sucks because both the guys I'm in a band with are big beer connoisseurs. They bring interesting beers to practice. I have been, giving them up, which is a bummer. But in my beer times, I'm also the same thing as you, where I like all kinds of beers. The one kind of beer I don't really like is the old fashioned kind of like we will hot fuck you IPAs.
Yeah. It's a good thing you live in Portland.
Well, it's gotten way better now.
Okay.
So like for a long time, Portland, the tap list were like 80%, the highest IBU IPAs that you could find.
Yeah.
Like everything was like the Challenge Nader, just like how bitter and nasty can we make this shit?
Stunt beers.
Stunt beers. And now IPAs are like, hey, these are hazy and fruity and taste good.
Yeah.
And everyone still loves them. Like you didn't have to make this taste like bitter bullshit for people to like it, guys. Like you could have just made good tasting drinks and then people would still like it.
Instead, what you've done is you've turned an entire generation off to hops.
Totally. And they taste good if you don't turn them into a challenge thing. It'd be like if I don't like hot sauce because I've only had like the one with the cartoon hillbilly having diarrhea on the label. Like, I don't like hot sauce because it's all that cartoon diarrhea. And it's like, well, no, like a good hot sauce is great. You like Scoville units. You just don't want that many. And that's what I feel about IBUs. So I really like a hazy or fruity IPA. I really like a German dark beer. Like a German dark beer with like weird shit like cocoa nibs and stuff. And it is my favorite. My favorite beer of all time is like the Baroque Dunkel at Stammtisch in Portland is my all-time favorite beer.
Yeah, no, German beer is wonderful. Like a Spaten Doppelbock or a Dunkelweiss.
Oh yeah.
Love a Dunkelweiss.
That's the good shit. Yeah, and it's just but I like all kinds of stuff. I like a sour, I like a Freem, I like any of that stuff.
Gosas are good.
Gosas are really good. Yeah. I like Gosas a lot. One thing when I was younger is I used to have like a taste for shitty American beer as kind of like a weird affectation kind of thing, and because of economics. And now at the times I do have those just make me feel full and gassy. For no end. So not worth it.
Yeah, I look at those and I think, is that worth the calories?
Yeah. And the answer is no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do some media questions and then some lightning round and then the topic.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do that. You asked that question, right?
Yep.
Let's see here. Media question from Gary, who says, "Who are your favorite members of
Gary
the
Marshall? Gary Marshall.
Yeah. Who are your favorite members of the Wu-Tang Clan? Alternatively, if this question is a bit personal, if you could have any guest of an episode, any of them guest on an episode of Bonfireside Chat, which member of the Wu-Tang Clan would you like it to be?"
ODB is my favorite Wu-Tang Clan.
I'm an Inspector Deck man. I like his flow.
Oh.
I like his flow the best.
It's a good name.
Yeah.
So would that also be the one you'd want to have on a guest on Bonfireside Chat?
No, ODB.
There was
I think Method Man would probably be good on on Bonfireside Chat. I think he probably has the most has the most insight on games.
The tightest strategy.
Yeah.
How about Nulando Ghostface Killer? I don't know. I don't care. I don't know. Anywho.
I think ODB would be the most entertaining. I think Method Man would be the most insightful.
I think that's probably pretty insightful. I forgot that we had show questions too. Let's just do 2 medias, then do 2 shows, and kind of move on quick. This one is will be fast. Matt says, "I've always wondered if you two have ever heard of or watched the 90s TV show Reboot. It's weird and silly and kind of awesome about video games. I never heard you two mention it, and it seems like it's the kind of thing that it would be fun to goof on. It's early computer animation, so it looks really goofy, but eventually goes to some weird places about alien parasites who live in the dark web."
Mm-hmm. I watched Reboot when I was a kid. It was on the afternoon block of Toonami on Cartoon Network, so it ran kind of alongside like Dragon Ball Z and stuff like that. I was into it. I've looked at episodes recently, and it's the CGI is distractingly bad. And the turn that the story takes to get dark is fucking inexplicable given the first season.
I have not. As a kid, I hated that show. Like, I was a little too old for when it popped up, and I have always resisted computer graphics. As like a thing like that. Like Beast Wars looks really bad to me. So I didn't really stick with it, but I'm familiar with it a little bit, and it'd be a good adaptation to K to do a couple episodes. I think of that.
I don't know if he's done it yet, but you know who loves Reboot?
No,
Evan Thorne. He's been talking about doing a show about it forever.
Yeah, I don't. For me, I didn't. Based on what I saw of it when I was younger, I don't really get it. But I was also haven't revisited it as an adult. And just didn't hit me. But I am familiar with the Reboot. Show questions.
Questions. Let's see here. That was you. I'll do one. I'm going to summarize this one real quick. But Greg writes, kind of starts with an anecdote about doing a draft episode for his podcast, the SNES podcast, 100th episode. We should do a draft, Gary. I think that'd be fun.
The description of that sounded really fun.
Yes. But during that, they got some flack for having a panel that was all a bunch of white dudes. So goes on to say, I think this is a problem with podcasts in general, but it's more widespread here in gaming podcasts. What do you think we can do to encourage people from different backgrounds to do their own gaming podcasts and be more accepting of them?
Yeah, this is tough because I think that like
this is where we fall down on it. So it makes us really hard to be good messengers for it.
Yeah, exactly. Like and it's a thing where like, the end goal of that is obviously something that we're in favor of. Yeah. And that we want. But it can't just be like, hey, you can just be like, hey, you should start a podcast and kind of say it that. But making it, there's a line there because if you try to make it your mission or whatever, do that, I think that it can come off as a little like invasive and weird. Yeah. To do so, I think just by making like a really welcoming space as best you can. Yeah. Is kind of the best thing you can do. And when you know people, if you have friends who are involved in games and stuff like that, and you're doing a podcast thing, try to involve them, and see, and at least ask. Like, you can't be held responsible if you have a couple lady friends, you're like, hey, I'm starting a game podcast. Do you want to do it? And they say no. Right. But you asked, and that's what you can do to kind of make it more encouraging. I think. And then if it's like a platform thing, and this is something that like, admittedly, like we could do better with, right? Like, as the network's grown, the network is mostly dudes.
Yes.
That's wasn't by design. It just happened to be who we knew.
Yeah, and
when we were starting doing it.
That is smallbusiness.text, right? And it is how a lack of diversity happens, which is you start a company with your friends. Your friends might look like you, and your friends might have friends that look like them and also look like you. On and down the line, right? We made shows with people who we were already tight with, and then boom, just all of a sudden.
Right. And now we're in a position where we're bigger. We're also, I think that once you get to that position where it is time to like start hiring and stuff, like it is definitely time to look into that. And like, if the Patreon continues to grow and we get to the point where we're like hiring, it's definitely something we'll keep in mind, right? Like when we're looking to bring people on.
Yeah.
Right now, it may not look like it, but the reality of the business is, as much as the Patreon has blown up, like we redesigned it to blow up to kind of meet a standard of living for ourselves, not to get rich.
Right.
So like, it's not like, oh, like you guys are doing great, it's time to start hiring like 4 interns. Like, no, we actually can't, that would erase any of our like being able to reasonably afford everything that we have with this. So, but it is something that we're thinking about. So I think if you have a position of power where you can actually like pay people and bring people in, consider those things.
Yeah.
And if you are starting a thing, consider that as well.
Yeah.
If you're able to, and that's about what you can do.
Additionally, if you are in a position to bring guests on, from different backgrounds and things like that, making space for that, and also helping to lift other people up or signal boost them is a positive thing if you're in a position to do that.
Yeah. One of the things about Greg's question is he says like, he just doesn't know a lot of people who do that. And that's something that like, I'm kind of sympathetic to. Right?
It's hard.
Like, it can be difficult, and it's not, I have, in my real life, I have a very diverse group of friends. When you start making that pool smaller and smaller, right? Like I have a diverse group of friends. A smaller subset of that are my friends who like games. A smaller subset of that are my friends who have the time and inclination to podcast.
Right.
And once that circle gets small enough, it is possible that what's left is Brayton Cameron, Nick Glauber, and Will Hughes.
Right.
Right. Which is basically what happened. Like when I did, one of the things I liked about doing Heartbeat City was like being able to have like some people on who were my friends who were not necessarily from the background, because the topic was so much broader.
Yeah.
Like there's momentum of games being a boys club that we're still shaking off. Like girls have always been interested in games, but it is something that in my just experience, like growing up, I knew a lot more men who were into games than I knew ladies who were into games. That's something that is changing. I think it's changing slowly.
Yeah.
And it is a weird Ouroboros where like the job of changing that will come from kind of diversifying that pool as well. So the more work you can do in that, as far as making acceptable spaces and encouraging people, the less likely that'll be in the future as well.
Yeah.
But it's not something that can change overnight. And if you don't, hey, I don't know anybody, like I want to do this thing with my friends. That's the vibe I'm going for. That's the chemistry. I don't know. Like right now, I know 2 people who want to do a podcast. They're both dudes.
No.
Does that mean you shouldn't do a thing? I don't know. Like, I think everybody gets to express themselves. So yeah, it's complicated. I think you can just kind of do your best to make space.
Yeah.
Yep. So, David says, are you guys thinking about doing any more music-based content? Content is in big letters. I really love File Underwater and the episode of Adaptation Decay about Buckner and Garcia. I would love to hear more discussion. Also, who gets the most pets, Greta or Pocket?
That should not be a contest.
That should not be a contest, but it is. And it's probably Pocket because I love him more.
No.
I'm just Greta likes being pet more. So yes. I think Greta likes belly rubs and stuff, and Pocket comes to you. Like he's a little bit more offish.
No, I think that's probably accurate, but I think that both of us, what's important is when there is an opportunity for a pet, we take it.
Yep. And we'll eventually do a crossover pet thing. We're going to do pet swap. We're going to do a weekend pet.
You're trading a little pocket-sized assassin.
Yeah, exactly. He's a sleeper agent.
Oh, yeah. As far as music content, when File Underwater was winding down, kind of a discussion was like, oh, are you going to replace this with something else? REM was just the perfect intersection, the Venn diagram of both of our tastes, taste and knowledge and stuff like that. I like talking about music though. It just has to manifest in other already existing shows.
Yeah, me too. I think that in a general sense, I currently have a 1 in 1 out policy on shows.
Yeah.
So like if a show runs its course, I would definitely consider doing such a thing. And there are other artists I would love to do an album by album kind of thing by. Like obvious choices for me are like David Bowie and Guided by Voices. The Guided by Voices one would last 10 years after I'm dead because he puts out more albums than I would get through.
Right.
But I don't want to do any more shows right now because I'm pretty full up.
Yep.
So, do you want to do a couple lightning rounds or do you want to move right on to the topic?
Let's do some lightning rounds.
Okay, let's do.
Yeah. Let's see here. Nick writes, are you guys fans of barbecue, specifically the low and slow American kind? I'd love to hear your favorite spots and dishes. Have you had any experiences cooking this type of cuisine for yourselves?
We do like barbecue.
Love it. When we were in Milwaukee, we had barbecue as our kind of like post-show dinner.
And when we were in Austin.
Oh, yeah.
I think we generally had barbecue when we go out. I love barbecue. It's one of my favorite genres of food.
Yeah. It's great. Do you have a favorite spot?
In Portland, I love Podna's. Podna's and Poshines, which is Poshines is a soul food restaurant, not necessarily just barbecue, but they have really great barbecue.
We had breakfast there, didn't we, at Poshines? Yeah.
Back when I used to live in that neighborhood.
Yeah. In Cincinnati, Eli's is my favorite. It's down by the river. It's a small place. You end up eating outside. But they make some fantastic pulled pork.
Yeah. So, and I have made pulled pork and pulled chicken. That's the only barbecue I've made, but I've made it in my house.
Yeah.
In my Instant Pot. I have not made it out on a grill because I live in a series of successively smaller apartments. Every time I move into an apartment, it gets a little bit smaller. It's like a reverse Silent Hill 4. And so I've never had room for a grill. So, have you ever made barbecue?
No, same as you. I've done, stuff in the Instant Pot or crock pot or whatever. I don't know if that technically counts. My brother, he has a smoker, and he uses that. So I've considered borrowing the smoker to make my own stuff. But
you're a homeowner now, so you could definitely do such.
Yes, yeah. I had a whole comedy of errors about buying a grill this weekend. Turns out some places when they sell you a grill, it's already assembled and it will not fit into your Kia Soul.
Oh wow, La Grill. What's that? JC says, if a wedding is not open bar, should you even bother going?
Yes. Yeah. Be there for your friends. It's their special day.
Yeah, weddings are great. If you don't like them now, you'll eventually grow to like them probably. Yeah. Or at least that's what happened with me. I didn't like them and now I love them. And I get a real misty and romantic feeling about weddings.
Yeah. Let's see here. More music stuff. Let's see here. Philip writes, Dead Kennedys or the Dead Milkmen, or both. Dead Kennedys.
I'm a Dead Kennedys guy too. Dead Milkmen are good, but I'm a more Dead Kennedys guy. Even though neither of which is in like my, frequent rotation.
Right. I appreciate the Dead Kennedys juvenile aesthetic more.
The Milkmen are extremely juvenile. Yeah. They're just very different kinds of juvenile.
Exactly.
Yeah. Craig says, you guys talk about REM a lot. What do you guys think about the Replacements? I love the Replacements. Yeah. Tim is one of my all-time favorite albums.
That's great. I came to them late. I didn't learn about the Replacements until I played Rock Band 2 and fell in love with the song Alex Chilton. So my catalog does not run as deep, but I put them on Spotify and I have not kind of like run across an album full of skippers yet. So
poor Alex Chilton. Poor Box Tops. poor Big Star. Whenever people just like get really into the Replacements through a song that's a tribute to Big Star. So.
I also listen to Big Star.
Big Star's great.
Yeah. Zone says, how do you feel about making an entire game based on Whipfest? I'm talking about the grappling.
I wish that there was more whipping.
Me too.
Like I'm deep in my second playthrough of Sekiro. The whip stuff is very fun, but it kind of weirdly is my fears about it, that it was going to be very limited. By making it traversal, it makes the traversal fun, but it's not expressive. Like it doesn't play into the combat and stuff in the way that maybe I would want. you know, like every once in a while you can get to a different vantage point to approach a situation from a different angle, but you could also get there by climbing or just get there by jumping usually. And it doesn't play into the combat very much. Like there's only a couple combat arts or a couple skills that fit with the grappling hook.
And only a couple of bosses. Only, you know, it is not as frequent as I would like for as prominent as the grappling hook is within boss or mini boss combat.
Yeah, same here. Which people would you never want to find out are actually mean or bad? Mike Mills is the obvious answer. I'm sure we both have.
Yep. That'd be the one.
Yeah. Do not want Mike Mills to turn out bad.
Right.
Do you want to move on to our topic?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay. So this is a new one. I guess we're definitely gonna have to do like a dispatch to kind of get through some of these topics because we have a bunch of them that are kind of piling up, but we'll do a special, if you're a patron, we'll do a special episode that's just like tackling like 2 of these topic things so they don't pile up too much. But this was just the one that happened to jump out to us this time.
Yeah. Let's see here. So Orky Bits writes, possible topic idea, romance in video games. Why does it seem like so few video games get it right? And then there's also a little tag here that's about Aptic Sufframe McDonald Land, but that is neither here nor there.
That's not the topic for this. No. McDonald Land is not the...
We've already done that.
That's our Vice series, Leaving McDonald Land. It's a 14 episode podcast thing, and each episode begins with a 2-minute recap and a 2-minute next time on, and it's fucking almost unlistenable despite the content. Take that uncovered. So romance in games, like we were talking about this a little bit in the green room, and it's a really interesting topic, but I think that there is a couple caveats we want to make up front. About it, is that we're primarily going to be addressing the AAA space.
Right.
With this, we know that there are indie games that handle this a lot better. We're not stepping on any of that. Like there's a whole universe of like, you know, like Christine Loves games and other kind of like visual novel type things and indie games that we're not criticizing with this.
Right.
Like we're talking about kind of bigger, more mainstream games and how they handle that and what we'd like to see and maybe what they kind of fuck up, what we don't like, but we are not picking on, you know, individual, you know, games that are more thoughtful about this. We just want to acknowledge that they exist. And, but I think that the spirit of the question is more like, how do they fuck this up? Is not really talking about those. Right.
So, additionally, you know, neither of us have experience with or really a taste for like dating sim kind of things.
Yes.
So, you know, that is, there are probably going to be elements that are common to that pop up in the AAA kind of stuff. You know, just understand that there is a lot of context there. You know, that is a diverse genre that is not all just like weird pervy stuff. You know, like there are Otome games and things like that. We just don't have insight on that. So it's possibly worth disclaiming there that, you know, that is a whole medium that we're not going to kind of broach or don't have the qualifications to broach.
Not only do we not have the qualifications, but I also don't feel like it's the spirit of the question too.
Right. Yeah.
Like, which is kind of the bigger thing. Like we're just trying to head off like, but what about this?
Yeah.
You know, us saying like these games don't really do this and people just saying like, well, actually, what have you heard of this? It's like the just use a kukri of like
of criticism,
you know, of criticism. And we don't know what about. It's like we're talking about broad trends, not making absolute sweeping statements. In a broad trend way, I agree that games suck at this. And there are a couple different ways. And I think that like one of the early ones to start with is efforts to break down something with infinite gradients down into a mechanical like set of binaries.
Yep. Looking at you, Harvest Moon.
Looking at you, Harvest Moon, looking at you, BioWare. Like this whole section could just be like, hey, BioWare is absolute shit at this. And I know a lot of people resonate with that and they treat it like a dating sim and stuff, but the transactional nature of romance in that is a big reason why they don't work for me.
Yeah. It's interesting to look at specifically Dragon Age as kind of an arc because it did change over the course of that. Over the course of that series, like it went from the really embarrassing gift system to kind of a more Mass Effect like, you know, just kind of interpreting it, spending time with them and following particular conversation lines more than anything. Just anything that reinforces the notion that romance is about putting in tokens and getting sex. Nah.
Yeah. Like separating, making sex the ultimate reward of these romance things seems very clearly problematic to me.
Yeah.
As a thing. And when I say problematic, like I don't want to speak for anybody. The reason why we're being so disclaimer about this is because I know that some of these games, like with audiences, have really resonated, right? Like, hey, I really love Dragon Age Inquisition because this character really resonated with me, and I loved being able to have this romance with this character. I'm not trying to take that away. I can only speak to like what worked for me or did not, like what I think about this.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the positive thing about this, and where this can be good is, oftentimes in a game like this, the romance pathway is the best way to get more of a character that you like, right?
Yeah.
And when it is presented as a story, when it is kind of like when the arc of your romance with that character tracks with and has integrated with the broader arc of the game, I think that is when it is done best, or when it has resonated the most for me, right?
Yeah. Well, even then though, like I think about the BioWare approach to that, and then I think about something like Torment, where like you do have the way you get to the bottom of characters is by following their quest lines. It's just none of them end in traditional romance.
Right.
Like even the romantic one ends in rejection of that.
Yeah.
Right. So like following a character's quest line is the way to get more of that character. And oftentimes in BioWare games, that is explicitly romance. Like it's very weird that in BioWare games, the way that I can interact with this character and get that depth is through falling in love with them and them falling in love with me. And that's the only, like, there's no, hey, we're real good friends that you can have. Like sometimes you make good friends in that, but the way that you complete their quest line or whatever for certain characters are like coded as romanceable. And that's what you can do with them.
And that, that somewhat tracks to real life, right? Because boundaries are different depending on, you're going to say something, you're going to divulge different things to your longest, deepest platonic friends. I didn't mean to phrase that as weird as I did, but to your, the person,
your longest friend. I got you.
Your longest friend, right? Yeah. You're going to divulge different things. The boundaries are going to be different for them compared to if you're romantically entangled with somebody, right? So it like makes sense that they would say different things, but like for the friendship angle of that to be so shallow does feel disappointing.
That's the thing, right? Like it does make sense that it'd be different, but it doesn't make sense for certain people to be coded as this person is romanceable. The way to quote unquote like complete this person in the game is only to make them my lover.
Yeah.
That's the only way they can exist, or as like a shallow companion who like provides a +2 healing buff to people within 3 meters, right?
Yeah.
And those are the two different ways, and it's very rarely, is there like a third option, and that comes from modeling something with infinite depth, to in terms of a computer, like in terms of like breaking it down to numbers, like even later BioWare games where it's not about the gift system, which is really atrocious, is still about filling meters. And, to make it not BioWare, like the Fallout 4 companion romance system, right, is still about filling meters. And that's just not how relationships work. Like it is a weird thing where, in my experience, like when you have like a romantic connection with somebody, it's something that happens quicker. It's not like you put in, it can grow over time, but it starts at an area where like there's just a compatibility there.
Yeah.
And when you have a character, when you're playing a character who's a blank slate, that the one side of that compatibility isn't set.
Right.
Like the game is you actively creating that and seeing if it matches, like you kind of like post fill it in. And that just, it feels weird.
Yeah.
Like it's a weird thing.
Yeah.
Doesn't really work.
When talking about the way this falls down, I think something that is just universally a problem with this is when the game shows sex. I think that A, never ages well. B, I always find it incredibly awkward. I understand if somebody doesn't, but like it just seems, I don't know, it just doesn't ring, right?
There's like different reasons in a piece of media you can show sex.
Yeah.
And some of the reasons might be to actually have that kind of character development, right? Like if it's a type of sex, like you're advancing a relationship, learning about the relationship based on the motions that people have sex in. That's something I haven't seen happen in games. Like, you know, I've had it happen narratively, but not the way that it's shown.
Right.
So like you can have something like Baldur's Gate 2 where you can have sex with Viconia, but then it's weird. It's awkward. The next day it feels weird.
Yeah.
That's like character development, and that advances the story and advances character. Showing it be awkward, showing it in a way that actually shows something about the character of the world is just something I've never seen done.
Yeah.
You know, the other reason you can show sex scene in a piece of media is to titillate and arouse.
To cut you off a slice of that cheesecake. Yeah.
To give you a piece of cheesecake. And that part is like, one, it's just not why I play games. And, you know, again, if that's why you play games, that's great. It's not how I play games. I can only speak to my experience. But two, it makes that transactional nature that came earlier grosser. Like if it's a reward, you know, and the idea is to give you a boner for this, for like pressing the right slots on a character, like pressing the right buttons on a character in the right order. Like there's just something that is too transactional about that, and having that as a reward that just feels like deeply problematic to me. You know,
when I've seen that, every example has undercut any sense of catharsis that arrives at that is implied by those two people deciding to share that, right? Like just like there is no catharsis for it.
Yeah. It just doesn't. Yeah, it's never landed.
Yeah,
you know, for me in that respect.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why it's interesting when I think about romances in games that have worked for me. One of the examples of what we're using here when I talk about Fallout 4 and we talk about BioWare games is they're all games where you create your own character. The times that romances have worked for me have been when they are bespoke characters.
Yes.
That just have a believable story. Like we heaped a lot of praise on the romances, the non like fuck scenes in The Witcher 3.
Yeah.
And it's because I find that relationship really believable. Like it makes sense for those two characters to have that relationship to me.
Yeah.
I don't know what it would be like to play a game where I made my own character and I had that element of cipherhood that comes with a BioWare or a Bethesda game.
Yeah.
And had a good relationship with somebody. Because then it almost has to be meters. Like the difference with if it's a story that's already been told, you're walking in partway through the story, those meters have all been filled up in the past.
Yeah.
You know, there's no meters. Like that just, and if you don't like Witcher 3, like use any example of a bespoke romance, you know, in a game. But you have like Geralt and Yennefer, they're just compatible. They have this history. To me, the game did a good job of making you feel that history around them. And if they decide to go at it, it's like, well, this is just characters that know each other really well and have been doing this for years, kind of on again, off again.
Yeah.
Whereas if I just make a character in a Bethesda or BioWare game, I feel like I'm being birthed into the world, like totally new.
Yeah.
And it's my job to go fill up all kinds of meters. Like I'm not only filling up relationship meters, I'm also filling up quest meters and equipment meters and level meters and stuff. Like it doesn't feel like there's a history there. And that is something, no history. It does feel like it's literally giving shorthand to something that has history in real life, usually.
Yeah. When I've enjoyed this kind of stuff, it has been a subversion either of expectations. So I'm going to try to minimize spoilers for you, Gary, because this is a game that we're intending to play. But in Mass Effect 2, there is a romanceable character who gives every outward opinion or gives every outward sign of being like the bad boy or girl, right? And the way that situation resolves is that it is like you're given a choice at the end, like do we fuck or do we talk? And like the successful version of that is to create an opportunity to share something greater than the physical connection. And that I think is a good subversion that they then turn around and then kind of never did again. So
yeah, they forgot about how to do it.
Yeah. The other thing that I really enjoy, Saints Row 4, which is a big Mass Effect parody by and large. You're walking around on your ship and, in Mass Effect, when you're on the Normandy or whatever, you go up and you talk to people. You can still do that in Saints Row 4. Like there are conversation things, but there is always the option to say, wanna fuck? And then there's just like a short little scene that thankfully cuts away. And then comes back. It's like, oh yeah, you can just do this whenever you want. Here you go, gamers.
I don't know if that's necessarily like a good example of it. It's just making fun of the same thing we don't like.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. but it makes sense.
It is a subversion, and it is subverting in a direction. It is dismissive of the thing that I am dismissive of.
Yeah, which is good because it's in line with what you think about that. Or you think about like fucking Renoa and Squall.
Oh yeah,
right. Like one of the first like explicit love stories.
We're fated to be together
in a game that I played, and like there's no sex, but is the romance in that game good? I don't know. Like I feel like if I went back to it, I don't feel like anything about it is quite good enough, other than mechanics, is good enough to make me believe that.
Yeah,
like it's almost the opposite problem. It's not transactional because they didn't try to model the mechanics of a relationship at all. It's just, does the story and writing hold up to it?
Yeah,
so it's one of the most complicated things you can involve yourself in real life. And that is why I think that so many people biff it. Like war is easy.
No.
Like war is, making people stop breathing.
Yeah.
And that's like comparatively very easy, but like being in a successful relationship is hard as fuck.
Yeah.
And that's just, something that's easier to portray than to model. And then attempts to model it, because it is so important and so elemental to the human experience, inevitably feel shallow and off.
Yeah. And I think that, when I think about why I'm critical of it, there can be any number of personal failings that could be reflective of. And I'll leave that up to people hearing this to decide if that is if that is the case. But when I think about why I would like to see this work better, and why I'm critical of the idea, is like there probably is value, like there is value to demonstrating romance in media, right? And for a lot of folks, like that models for you how like just be for good or for ill, mostly for ill. A lot of our relationships early on, especially when we're new to this or inexperienced, are modeled based on media, based on examples that we see out there. And when games continually fall short, it feels like it is, an incomplete example that sets people up for maybe a lot of pain. Additionally, there are needs that people have fulfilled by seeing this by seeing these things in media. How many times have people written in and said, oh, I didn't realize, or I hadn't fully expressed, this kind of non straight up the middle sexuality until a game gave me a space to play with that. Right.
Yeah.
To consequence free, just kind of try this on, to put on this ad and see how it looks. Or people who are incredibly shy, who do not have, who do not have it in them, or have not had it in them in the past, to go out and seek that connection. It is a way for them to experience it, parasocially. I don't know if that is the right phrase, but close enough. Right. So like when I think about why I want this to be better, it is for folks like that, because I understand it, just based on talking with people, that is incredibly important.
Yeah. And even if people do get from it, those people who could stand to have it better and stand to be served better, if they get a version of that, like they, even just like, hey, I enjoy engaging with this because any of those reasons you listed, I'm not here to take that away.
Yeah.
Right. Like I can say why I think they biff it, but if other people it is perfect, that is awesome.
Yeah.
And also if it could be better for those people, but it's still good enough now, I don't want to take it away from them. I hope that they
do it.
I think
it's not me saying you don't get to eat this cake. It's not done yet. Put it in the oven more.
You guys can eat the cake. Yeah. It is. I wish that there were options. Again, the way that expense doesn't factor into how something would be better is I would like it if there was a way for me, if I am playing one of those games, I'm not interested in doing that in a BioWare game, there was a character who I could interface with, and there would be multiple paths. Like they could be a friend or they could be romantic.
Yeah.
And have them both have the same kind of depth. Like, romance in games, like as a way to complete an NPC quest line is the default. Like there aren't that many, like they exist, but I can think of fewer examples where it's like, this is just like a really great friendship.
Yeah.
Like, wow, what a good friendship this is.
Yeah, no, that was going to be my final point is like, yes, romance is good and sublime, but there are any number of kinds of relationships. Like, I don't know, I want more filial love to be shown. Like, I want more connection between, father and son, between, brother and sister, to be
mother and
explored.
daughter.
Just any number of
second cousin and aunt.
just any number of platonic relationships that can have depth and can be rewarding and reach their own catharsis that doesn't involve prurient models going at each other. I think that is
Sonic
worth
the Hedgehog, the Avuncular Chronicles.
I'm just like how does Sonic treat his nephew?
Yeah. The weird garden where he grows his nephews.
The Chow Garden? Are the Chow Sonic's nephews?
I assume they look like it.
Yeah.
They got nephew energy.
Yeah. But because romantic relationships have primacy and sell, then there's just that is how we see it. That is how we see it manifest. All going back to whenever the power of friendship is brought up in a piece of media, it is almost never earned. You have not shown me the benefit of friendship or articulated a friendship more so than having more bodies to fight more people is a good thing.
Yep. Yeah. They need to be friends more than just scenes. It's one of those things where too, I think about something like, good game, that I'm not ragging on here, but I'm just using an example. Like, I was going to say Chrono Trigger, but any of the 16-bit Final Fantasies, right?
Yeah.
In my head, I think of the crew of Final Fantasy VI as good friends. But when I think about that, it's not necessarily their interactions I'm thinking about. And that's a limitation of the year it came out, basically. Yeah. It's a scene of them all hanging out with music that I find nostalgic.
Yes.
And that's Chrono Campfire.txt, right?
I have that shadow box right here on my desk. I'm looking at it right now.
Which evokes a feeling.
Yeah.
But I don't think you could argue that the game is good at portraying friendships.
Right.
Those are good high depth friendships. So just kind of in general, kind of the opposite of the violence episode. Like while I agree, I stand by my, there are too many violent games is a little bit of an annoying criticism to me. That's unfounded. I do think I would like to see more relationships or more games that model different kinds of relationships, or at least focus on them, yeah. So, maybe just try it. But who's to say that once they start doing friendship relationships, they're not going to go through the same growing pains as they did with romantic ones? I mean, look at A Way Out. Yeah. You look like a cigarette smoking type. This could be a good cigarette for you.
Yeah.
That's not a good two friends relationship game. I don't know, man. It is really, it all comes down to it being difficult to model human relationships, which are very complicated with numbers. And you can mechanically try to do that, and you're going to fall a little bit short most times, and you can narratively do it and land it if you're a good writer. And a lot of games writers, it's more about the plot and less about the character, and they don't do it as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Thanks, everybody. So that's the end of the Q&A portion. If you want to send us a question, hit us up. You can do so by being a patron. If you go to patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv.
Yep.
We're going to read your responses now to this month's games. If you want to send in a response for next month's games, that is at duckfeed.tv/contact.
Yeah. So I'll get us started here. With about creative games here. I believe this person's name is pronounced Shindra. Writes in via content. I apologize if I mangled that. I want to thank you so much for mentioning Jetpack on your recent live episode from the Midwest Gaming Classic. That game is a fond childhood memory for me. My family often spent part of the summer with a friend of my mom when I was little. She had 3 sons, and I would always end up playing Jetpack with them. Jetpack may in fact be the first video game I ever played, but I never knew what it was called since I had not learned any English at that point. So now that you two have made me aware of this game again, I will certainly give it a go. I looked at some screenshots earlier, and the visuals really took me back. Keep in mind, I have not seen the game since I was in my single digits.
Yeah, a couple of people mentioned that actually on the Patreon, various other places.
Yeah.
And I've still never heard of it. I may have said something about hey, I'll look that up after the show, but I was lying for theater.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't. I actually still don't know this game, but I'm glad that other people resonate with it.
Happy to be of service.
Wow. Yeah. Moving on to responses about Batman Arkham City. Take says via contact, I love Arkham City. The game actually helped me reconnect a bit with my sister when we were estranged at the time. I think she was over at the house for an obligatory birthday dinner. I went, check out this game I'm playing. I just got it today. And we ended up playing through the game till the ending credits started rolling in the morning. We even hot-seated the controller a few times when I got stuck. I had a real hard time figuring out the flying sequences in Raj sequence. the Ra's al Ghul sequence. It was probably one of the best memories I had with my sister in recent times.
Love that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's very sweet.
Yeah. I don't know that I have anything else to add about that.
No, it's just like a nice little story. I always like that. That kind of response.
So we got some feedback about our pronunciation of Ra's al Ghul. We were praised for getting it right, but over the course of the episode, we eventually started saying Rage al Ghul.
Oh, rage! Yeah. I think that's more of my mush mouth than anything else.
I think we all did it. I think both of us. I'm not going to put that on Doug. But
no, Doug, I'm sure was immaculate.
Yeah.
About it. Real quick, again, shout out to Doug, not only for sponsoring the episode, but he sent a nice little gift.
I just got that today, I think. Yeah.
It's a very sweet little thoughtful memento. It's a tiny, I don't want to spoil it if you haven't opened it.
No, I've opened it.
Oh, a tiny little Mr. Freeze.
Yeah, love it. It's already up on my shelf.
Very cute. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you. Let's see here. Justin says via contact, it sounds hyperbolic, but I can't imagine someone having a better experience with Batman Arkham City than I did. A friend gifted me his PS3 copy, so I had no emotional investments or expectations. I loaded it up one April evening, thinking I'd play for a few hours. Minutes after the real-life sun rose the next morning, I watched Batman emerge from the Monarch Theater, the Joker cradled in his arms. Without planning it, my night had synchronized with Batman's in the narrative. My mental fatigue was his physical fatigue. My 3 a.m. decision to finish the game before morning was Batman's mission to catch the Joker. We decided to ignore mobs of henchmen in the streets. Our brawls, when necessary, devolved into graceless exercises in efficiency. Side quests went abandoned or unanswered in our haste to save the city. This was no mere gaming session. I had stumbled into the conditions that turned Arkham City into a Batman simulator. It was serendipitous, organic, and, sadly, impossible to reproduce.
That's great.
Yeah.
One of the things I spent the entire time in the run up to that episode meaning to bring this up, and I think I forgot to. Mm-hmm. I might have mentioned it, but I might have forgotten. The idea of ignoring screams throughout the city. Mm-hmm. The political prisoners quest, there are thugs torturing guys. Mm-hmm. So the streets of Gotham are just filled with screams, and they're really well recorded and scary and agonized screams that since I was beelining, I was ignoring, and it was the least Batman thing I've ever done in my life.
Batman would not let that stand.
Making breakfast and like doing the dishes. Like I do dishes in a more Batman way than Batman was swinging through the city, ignoring those people having their ribs broken again and again. So it was the being on that beeline. Mm-hmm. I got it for sure.
Yeah.
Lauren says via contact. Roughly 1 million years ago, I hosted a podcast of my own where my co-host and I played games at random from our Steam libraries. One episode, I got Arkham City to play. Now, I'd never played any of the Batman games, and this was several years after it came out, but I always heard great things about it. I have a strange relationship with Batman-related media in that I think Batman as the least interesting part of his own series. The characters I really appreciate are the villains, in particular, the Riddler, Poison Ivy, and Harley Quinn. All of them have so much more texture in the comics than Batman ever did, at least to me. Anyway, I boot up the game and start playing through, and it was rough going. The main elements of the games that I saw talked about were the traversal, the combat, and the richness of the characters you interacted with. I straight up do not understand how any of those elements that are touted as great are so good. The traversal felt tedious and boring to me, and I found myself having real problems with wanting to explore. The combat was fine, I guess, but by this point I had played roughly 10 other games that built on this foundation, especially Shadow of Mordor and Hand of Fate. Those games at least have something interesting going on to wrap the combat system around. So really, that just left the richness of the world, and I gotta say, it was also very bad. Everywhere I went, all I could hear were thugs talking about riding that Harley and making terribly misogynistic dialogue with each other. The general violence expressed towards women was shockingly bad. Additionally, all of the characters felt like sad attempts at being dark and edgy, like some kind of failed comic line of the 90s. My favorite characters came out of the game portrayed utterly terribly, and the experience was awful for the 4 hours I managed to play it. Listening to your responses to playing the game were surreal to me, like I'd accidentally played some Negaverse coffee or something. I know I'm in the minority here, but I sure won't be revisiting the series anytime soon.
No.
Definitely don't play any of the other games if that bugged you.
Yeah.
They're of a piece.
Yes. And I think it only gets worse in night, even though it's pretty rough.
Yeah. And the misogyny thing, I definitely am with you on. Like, that's something that we talked about a lot in the Slack, actually.
Yeah.
When on the run up to the game of just kind of like, boy, this uses the B word a whole lot.
Yeah.
For no particular end.
Nope. I mean, other than to say like, hey, these are bad guys who say that, but it is still, unironically portraying that point of view to the point where,
and to just an excessive degree, like the kind of nature of the game is you're just kind of bathed in that dialogue through the entire experience of playing through the radio thing. So you're just kind of constantly hearing a low level patina of it. They talk about other things as well, but like that's definitely stood out to me as well.
Yeah.
The other points, like we did the episode and stuff. I don't necessarily agree. Like I think the combat's really fun. Its traversal's really fun. The characters are like really, kind of dark and edgy versions of it. I also, to me, like I imagine the ideal version would be somewhere in the middle of that, because like the weird Silver Age, like kind of 4-color DC thing doesn't work for me. I know that it works for some people, but those versions of those characters always come off as silly. I would buy that this is an overcorrection, but I also would not necessarily have wanted them as portrayed. But keeping in mind the last like Batman I read was all about, it was like the Grant Morrison run where it's like all about Mr. Pig like ripping off people's faces and shit. Like it was pretty dark and edgy the last time I checked in on Batman. Like it's something I associate with the character.
Any character or kind of pantheon of characters that has been around for as long as these have, you're going to go through those different eras and you're going to arrive at this. And if it doesn't pull from the era that you prefer, it can really, resonate like 10. Yeah,
absolutely. But yeah, I definitely understand that. Like those things, if I had played Shadow of War, if I had played other games that did this first, like since I played Asylum first, this was my first experience with this combat. So it was pretty revelatory. It's like something I associate with Batman, not with any of the games that came afterwards.
Right.
So it was new to me, which did a lot.
We're going to do the Hitman responses next because the Life is Strange responses are almost all spoilers. That's a story-based game, so we're going to do that at the end after we do the admin, just so people don't get confused. Going to start here with Holland, who says via contact, I've been playing Hitman in anticipation of WoW. It's fun and very clever at times, but I don't like the time investment required to pull off the clever stuff. Each level requires multiple playthroughs, which is fine, but the first couple of attempts are almost guaranteed failures because you have to canvas the level and figure out where all of the items and disguises are. It can be a significant time investment for very little payoff. A little more ease of use would have gone a long way with the title, I think. Maybe a suggestion where an item might be likely to be found, so I'm not spending 20 minutes looking for a wrench. There's a lot of clever and fun gameplay, but it's gatekeeped by an amount of trial and error that some people, myself included, won't have the patience for.
There's been people were talking in the Slack about this too, and a couple people had this problem, and it's one of those things where like I understand this perspective, but I don't agree with it. Like I have a very different experience with this.
For me, that time investment and exploring to find where that stuff is the game.
Like it's super fun to me. And so I guess like the game is so short, like, so having a couple run throughs where they don't go according to plan, which is a point I want to put a pin in that, but like don't go according to plan, like is part of the loop. Like you were intended to, like almost like a roguelike or something, like go through it a few times, which Holland says it would be fine, but that didn't bother me as a thing because of the second point, which is I guess like there's a couple things in here that are like terms that I like, for me personally, like when I play the game, not saying in this response, but when I play the game, I have to interrogate what they mean. Right. And one of which is like payoff, like what is the, when you say you have this time investment for the very little payoff, like what is a payoff? And then also what is a guaranteed failure? And I think that this game, and this can just be how I play games, right? Like go to any of our Dishonored episodes or whatever. But I think this game resists going through and saying, I have to do this as perfect stealth the first time I do a game, do a playthrough. And like, I understand people who can't play a game and not do the perfect non-lethal, S rank thing and can't not go for that. I am just really happy that I can, because that is the difference for me for this, because there's no such thing as a guaranteed failure. In my experience of playing Hitman, like if I decide to I'm going for a certain thing and I quick save beforehand. I have no problem with quick saving. Like some people would consider that to be a cheat as well.
Yeah.
But I have no problem quick saving and trying again. And if I decide I'm just kind of freeballing it, which I do the first couple of runs through thing, anything goes. Like I let myself get caught. I run away. I go hide in a dumpster.
Yeah.
I go break into the kitchen, break someone's neck, put on their clothes and stuff them in the freezer barely in time to start chopping vegetables
right.
as them,
Yeah.
And that is the game. Like that's super fun to me, as fun as the perfectly pulled off plan.
Yep.
So there's no like, if there's not a fail state, like a lot of these things don't resonate, like the time investment and such.
Yeah. I mean, again, that's just a matter of taste. This is a matter of preference. Those early attempts where, both success and failure are barely held together chaos, that is super entertaining to me.
Yeah. Yep. It depends on how many, like there's like a weird extrinsic versus intrinsic value thing that happens almost only in stealth games. Like this criticism, and it would not necessarily from Holland. Like I don't mean to paint Holland with a broad brush of like other arguments I've seen, but I'm kind of responding to them all at once. Reminds me of Dishonored stuff, where people are like, the Dishonored play is, if you're doing it, never getting caught 100% non-lethal, it's this kind of game. And I understand like people just, well, what if you don't play it as that kind of game? And then to me, it just opens up. And it's so fucking wide and beautiful and like a really fun experience. And just I understand some people just can't do that, but if you do it, like it does become a different thing.
Yeah. And your relationship with your time and what you consider to be, respectful of it and what is a waste of it, that is obviously going to be different from person to person. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So that's something that is completely valid.
Yeah.
It's whatever the difference is, when you look at somebody and it feels like they had a totally different experience with a piece of media, and you try to figure out like what are the differences in approach or differences in taste that account for that difference. Like that's the difference in taste, I think, that accounts for that difference.
Yeah.
For this. I also found that mostly things were where I expected them to be. Like I had a lot of joy of being like, hey, I need a wrench to untighten this thing. Let's go find a workroom. Yeah. Or a basement or something. And it would almost always find a wrench in a garage or a basement or somewhere where it made sense to be. So that was actually, again, a really fun part of this game.
Yeah, there was joy in kind of reading the architecture and reading the facility and having it, having those guesses or those suppositions be rewarded.
Which was typically my response.
Yeah.
Moving on, Samuel says by contact. I finished the Hitman 2016 campaign, and I probably don't have much to add besides effusive praise and a recommendation to definitely play the Hitman 2 campaign afterwards. Besides being one of my favorite games I've played recently, it's a fantastic game to watch other people play online. If you like Giant Bomb at all, they have tens of hours of this game in various forms for various reasons. My personal favorites are the Hitmiss videos, where they turn Hitman into a party game, and the two quick looks of the Marrakesh map, where Brad and Dan play terribly for 2+ hours, and it ends with them knocking out General Zaydan and most of his guards, piling them up in the intercom room, then dropping a toilet full of explosives on them. Also, playing a level of Hitman on the casual difficulty is the perfect balm after a couple of attempts at whatever Sekiro boss you're currently stuck on. So, yeah, it is the relationship between this game and Sekiro in general was on my mind the entire time I played it because of proximity.
Yeah.
It's just, boy, like it wasn't a mistake because it was an effective marketing term, but just in terms of laser targeting to Gary, From made a mistake by saying Sekiro, the game where you kill ingeniously. And then I just happened to play Hitman right afterwards.
Yeah.
And I've never felt less ingenious killing in Sekiro, where it's like, the ingenious part is like, how about some firecrackers to get in 2% more damage? And Hitman, where the ingenious part is, what if you pile up all their unconscious bodies in the intercom room and then drop a toilet full of explosives on them? You know, one of those is just going to have more appeal to me.
Yeah.
Like, not that I love Sekiro. Like, Sekiro is great. Yeah. It's just not expressive. Yeah. And I played it right before I played the most expressive game where you kill that I've ever played. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I don't understand why you hate Sekiro so much, Gary. Like, you've got a show to talk about it, but you hate it so much.
It's so weird, right? Yeah. Like, I love it's because I'm personally trying to hurt people. Okay, I just want them to feel bad, and that's the goal. Is that
connects a lot of dots for me, actually.
Yeah, it's a sadism thing. And I have the power, so if I'm mean enough about it, I might get it canceled and then take something away from somebody. Yeah. I actually adore Sekiro. Like, there's a weird, I'm really happy playing it vicariously through you because you are in like the good zone right now.
Yeah.
And the middle zone of this game is so fucking good.
Yeah.
Like the, past the first set of boss walls, before the end boss walls, there's this middle section that is just like exquisite. And I am really glad that we're talking about it for the show now, and that we're both playing through at the same time.
Yes.
So
good stuff. Let's see here. Christian says, so this is a little bit different, but we don't really do responses on Adaptation Decay. Adaptation Decay is the premium show where we talk about the ways that games are adapted into other media. This month we did the Hitman movie. And this is a response about the Hitman movie. But Christian says, howdy. I just listened to your excellent Adaptation Decay episode on Hitman, the 2007 version starring Timothy Olyphant, and I thought I could shed a bit of light on a detail you noted in the movie. The reference to using gas to facilitate a raid on a church was likely a reference to a real-world incident from 2002. Don't read too far into this Wikipedia entry unless you're prepared to be thoroughly horrified, but it discusses a 2002 Moscow theater raid by Russian special forces in which gas was deployed against terrorists holding a crowd hostage. It went as badly as one would expect. In any case, I hope this sad bit of real-world news sheds some light on an otherwise bizarre detail in a mediocre film.
So this is something a couple of people also brought up.
Yeah.
Which I'm really happy they did, because we were reacting to how ludicrous it sounds, but truth is stranger than fiction. Yeah, sometimes. So, yeah, that's pretty amazing. I did read about it afterwards, and it is a bummer.
Yeah, it went as poorly as you could expect. Yeah, exactly as Christian said. Sorry, I literally just read that.
Yeah, no, it's quite all right. Yeah, so it's good to know though that was actually a thing. So rough stuff. Before we do Life is Strange responses, we're going to do our admin, just because, again, they're spoiler. So thanks everybody for writing in either with questions or responses. We really do appreciate it. If you have anything to say about next month's games, which are Into the Breach, The Seventh Guest / The 11th Hour, The Adventures of Lolo, or Tetris, hit us up at duckfeed.tv/contact.
Yes. Additionally, if you have any thoughts about, let me see here. If you have any thoughts about July's games, wow, July already, Gary. The deadline for those responses is July the 15th, and I believe, Gary, July is our last theme month, dictated by some of our patrons. Yeah.
Yes, so we're going to announce July's games now.
Yeah.
July is 3D platformer month.
Yep. We have not done them very much.
No, but I'm excited about the ones that we are doing.
Yes.
For this. So we are doing, and we don't have this exact order, so we'll figure it out. But we are doing Psychonauts. We are doing A Hat in Time. And we are doing Mirror's Edge.
Yes. The original, the 2008 one, not the reboot that is just called Mirror's Edge.
Yes. Yeah, the original Mirror's Edge, the 3D parkour platform game, which I've never played.
I hope buckle up, because you're going to hear me talk about motion sickness a lot.
It is an act of violence upon Ross.
Yep. No. Again, the aforementioned sadism.
Yep. Turn on the Flargle Stomp as we get into Wiggle World. We're living in a wiggly world. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to playing A Hat in Time. That's a game I've actually been curious about quite a bit, because I want to see, the 3D Nintendo 64 era 3D platformer is something that I haven't touched with, connected with it very much. But I wanted to see one made with modern sensibilities.
Yeah.
And those are, we'll talk about, those are patron requests. I don't have the names exactly handy, but the month and then also the games are. And we'll mention those as we get closer.
Yeah.
But we do really appreciate that. If you do decide, you can no longer sponsor a month, but you can still produce a game for the show, and you do so by being a patron.
Yes.
So, moving on to Life is Strange.
Yeah.
Content here. Quick kind of a blanket statement we want to make beforehand. We got a little bit of feedback about our treatment of the LGBTQ issues in this. We're not going to read all of that. We're going to limit our responses to being about the game itself, not about the commentary. But just know that we do, we hear that, we read it, we do our best to internalize it, and we appreciate the feedback.
Yeah. It's a value that we have, and it is a value that we always want to keep an eye toward getting better at.
Yeah. So moving on to responses about the game itself. Marina says via contact. So there's actually a whole thing about Warren being a total creep. It's not just the vibes. Check out this first post in the Steam thread. And there's a thread there of foreshadowing of Warren being a monster. That is stuff that we missed.
It is details that we were not attuned to.
Yep.
Again, because perspective and experience.
And some of it we just didn't notice.
No.
Like, it's not even perspective and experience. I think this is more just, some of them are like almost like Easter eggs, but they're looking at them in aggregate is really cool. Like, I live for this shit.
And by cool, it's like, oh yeah, no, that's there.
well developed.
Yes.
Like, it's cool that they went through. It's cool from a storytelling perspective that they went through the pains to foreshadow this so well. Not cool. Like, I am in favor of photography murder.
Right. Not cool as in, I think that Warren is actually cool. He is actually
not
good.
Cool like a skateboard.
Right.
Cool like Deadwood.
Yeah.
Like tell them something pretty is cool, not like No.
Yeah. But yeah, this is all good stuff to know. It's a very detail rich game, and it's easy to miss those details.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or difficult, but we happen to regardless.
Yes.
Maybe it's not easy to miss them. Maybe we just miss them.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Samuel writes via contact, the time travel element in Life is Strange really provided a much needed twist to the choose A, B, or C before the timer runs out genre of video games that was the style at the time. But speaking of the style at the time, a real onion tied to this game's belt was
that expression.
Let's make it a
that's
thing.
Really good as a general thing. Like the onion on the belt is the signpost of something being outdated. That's super good.
It's very good. But the real onion on this game's belt was the way characters kept saying social media instead of Twitter, Insta, or a fictional app. This attempt to make the game seem modern but timeless just made several scenes sound like Dare videos whenever a CGI fake teen said something like, "Don't post that on social media," or "I'll check my social media." This seems especially egregious since they could have just used the term online if they didn't want to use a specific app, like everyone else does. I still hear people say, "Don't post that online. I'll find him online," or "Give me 5 Bs for a quarter" online in the wild to this day. Now, where were we? Oh yeah. The most important thing about Life is Strange is that I had an onion tied to my belt.
This is a good response.
Yeah.
It's well crafted. It's cool and in a skateboard way. I don't know.
Yeah. And it's, relatively minor compared to the bigger issues that the game addresses. But, it's that verisimilitude is important. And when the dialogue is already on extremely shaky ground, that particular detail can fucking grate.
Yeah, it's something weirdly that I didn't notice, but I just kind of thought of it as a period piece thing. But in retrospect, now that you say it, I see it.
No.
I absolutely see it.
FedEx arrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is definitely weird. I'm glad they didn't go say Twitter or what have you.
Yeah.
Though either, because then who knows, right? Then that might have been way worse.
Yep.
As it's just we no longer use Twitter. We
don't post that on MySpace.
Don't put that on Mastodon. Hey, don't Mastodon that. It's still one of my all-time favorite tweets where it's I know more people have seen an UFO than are on Mastodon. It's just keep trying.
Yeah. No, if you want more thoughts on this, go to my LO profile.
Yeah, exactly. Join my tribe. Become my Friendster, and you can read my note.
God, fucking just corporate vassals.
I don't want a tangent because this is already a long episode. I'm sure I mentioned this, but I told you I met my wife on Friendster, right?
No.
Isn't that crazy? It's a weird thing a sentence that doesn't make any sense in the future. Yeah, my ex-wife, I guess, then wife.
Yeah.
My then girlfriend, then wife, then fiance, then wife, now ex-wife.
Yeah, I think wives are like Marines. Marines are presidents.
Semper Fi. My wife was like a Marine. Riley says, by contact. In the episode, you question why somebody would refuse to help Chloe in her assisted suicide in the alternate timeline. Morally and rationally, I understood the argument that Chloe was making, and I agreed with it. She was going to die in a few months anyway. I could see how much pain she was in, all of that. But similar to the protestations Max herself can give with the I don't know option, I just didn't have it in me to press the button. This is something that often happens in fiction in real life, but it's one of the only times it's happened to me as a player where I can agree something is the right thing to do, but emotionally lack the fortitude to follow through with it. Video games usually give a comfortable distance to actually having to carry out the specifics of our choices, but for whatever reason, I couldn't press that button here, even believing that I should. That I cared for the characters so deeply, and this affected me how it did, speaks towards the quality of the game. I did save the town in the end. Maybe I'd finally found peace with Chloe wanting me to let her go, but I also couldn't let all those other characters I'd grown to care for die. Finally, in terms of Chloe as ground zero for spreading slang, after playing the game, my friends and I, college students at the time of release, all picked up regular use of the word hella that we continue to this day. She's spread it to the real world too.
Oh no,
Black
it's
Mirror. Black Mirror.
Yeah,
Black Mirror.
Oh man, the virus has jumped from birds to humans. We're fucked.
Yeah, if you die in the hello real world, I don't know.
Yeah, hella dead.
Yeah, hella dead. You end up hella dead in real life.
Yeah. It wasn't until people responded to the episode that I realized the complete mismatch between me being like, fuck yeah, I will euthanize Chloe, and then also choosing the ending where I sacrifice the entire town.
Yeah. It just, I think that, we get a couple of responses about that ending thing, and I just don't know that the game, for my experience, did such a great job of selling it just being the town was going to die.
Yeah.
And we talked about that a lot in the episode, right? But, like, that's just kind of how I felt about it. Like, in the experience, and that's, that's just where I landed on it. Nothing to do about it. It's just, like, how I ended up feeling about it at the end.
Yeah.
So...
this one's neat, right?
What's also, so the reason why you would feel good about one of those and not the other is it's an anonymous versus individual style thing. Like, you're not making decisions like a robot. You're making a decision about a person you're seeing in pain, and the abstract, like you're doing what people do all the time. Yeah. Right. Like, it's, I think it makes perfect sense to treat those choices as differently, because that's not the trolley problem. Yeah. It's not like you sitting down and just looking at abstract stick figures, Yeah. So.
Yep. Vincent says via contact, I'm hesitant to call Life is Strange good. Goodish, maybe? The writing is just so awkward, which is a damning thing to say about a narrative game. Many have remarked that it feels like men writing dialogue for young girls. It's slightly worse than that. It's French men writing dialogue for young girls from the Pacific Northwest. There's a cultural ignorance which permeates almost every use of slang in the game. Hella cash. Movie booty? Ugh.
I forgot about movie booty.
Movie booty is unforgivable.
Yipes. Big yipes.
It's plain to see that Don't Nod wanted to evoke the feeling of a place and time, but without proper context, the end result is distracting at best and embarrassing at worst, which makes Ashley Burch's performance all the more remarkable. That she can connect with dialogue so inelegant speaks volumes about her chops. Sadly, the same cannot be said for poor Max. Her disaffection makes her feel like emo Daria. However, Daria worked because her flatness complemented her wit. I have a bunch of issues with Life is Strange's plot, too, but I'll focus on the one that truly stuck in my craw. The first time Max Butterfly affects a photograph. Much like Ashton in That Stupid Movie, she creates an alternate timeline where she's a member of the Vortex Club. When I finished episode 3, I figured we'd spend the bulk of the next episode in this timeline, interacting closely with Victoria and Nathan, pretending to be their friend and trying not to tip them off to Max's allegiances. I knew she would return to her original timeline at some point, but only after learning whatever she needed to learn. I was on board with this idea, mainly because it would have allowed the writers to develop Nate and Victoria as characters. But alas, the entire plot point amounts to what feels like an attempt to introduce a new power, just so it doesn't feel contrived when Max uses that power in episode 5. It makes the whole scene feel inconsequential, though considering the ending, I suppose that's Life is Strange.txt. And speaking of that ending, yeah, it's a urine-soaked hella hole. Sorry. Players are forced to choose between saving the town or Chloe, and I can't figure out why she couldn't do both. If using her powers caused the tornado, then just return to that moment in the school bathroom and stop Chloe at the door. I'm pretty sure her rage on for Nathan would go soft the second that she saw Max. It's writing like this which made me lose tons of goodwill toward the game. I don't regret my time with it. I have a soft spot for the drama, the tone, and the soundtrack, but I can't recommend it without a bunch of caveats and qualifiers.
This reminds me a little bit of the same thing we were talking about, the romance section, where like games by their nature have to be kind of quantified into discrete units. So like having the ability to shunt back through time, even when she first gets it, you could almost go back to when, like there are times when you can rewind time a really long time. And when she first gets it, rather than jumping out and stopping the shooting, she could stop her from going into the bathroom, like you mentioned. Like, if it were real life, it was a perfect sim. In real life, she could do a lot more. The powers do form to contrive to hit the dramatic beats.
Yes, the story they wanted to tell was that Chloe is fated to die.
Yeah, so I can see that being frustrating because it does break its own rules quite a bit. And I don't know that the photograph thing was just there to establish, that last bit, but I think it is there to do that and then also establish that gut punch. Like the idea of this being episodic meant every episode needed to end with some kind of like, and that wheelchair reveal is a big one, right? Like that's a big like, oh shit moment. They had to get that across.
Yeah. If they weren't already in the throes of like, okay, this thing, needs to speed to its conclusion. Like, okay, we're in the last 2 episodes and the next to last episode of any given like television series is always the most action packed. Right.
Yeah.
If they weren't already there, I would totally be down with like, how do I pretend like I belong here? That seems like a really cool idea. And I can see feeling disappointed that there is no payoff for that, especially if you waited that month or waited that time in between and thought that's what you were going to be getting in the next one. Like all of a sudden I even more don't belong.
Well, and that would have been neat too. Like, I think that during the episode, like I recall having some issues with like, oh, so now I'm a preppy. Like, how did that happen from this person's dad not dying? Right. That is the mechanics of that are a little goofy. And it just, you said it, Cole, like in the episode, like time travel stories have to be about emotional truth, not mechanical truth. You just kind of have to unfocus your eyes and go along with the ride with some of that stuff, which I was able to do, but I don't fault anybody who's not able to do it. Yeah. Moving on, Autumn says, talking about the ending choice as well. Saving Arcadia Bay is the right choice. It's the utilitarian moral choice. It's the resolution. All the quote unquote trying to fix everything with time travel just makes it more complicated and worse plot points. It's the more fleshed out ending by far. I've even seen people like Errant Signal argue that saving Chloe shouldn't be presented as an option at all. But being queer is an act of transgression. Being gay or trans publicly and without compromise means burning a few bridges and disappointing your parents, letting down your family that wanted you to have kids, fighting the people who see you as a son and can't imagine that you would be a daughter. And my position has always been, get rid of these people. Find your own family, be with the people who love you for who you are, and build something better without the dead weight. If destroying Arcadia Bay is the price for getting to be happy with your girlfriend, then sorry guys, but Arcadia Bay has got to go. And fuck this town for making you make that choice in the first place.
Well stated.
Yeah, absolutely well stated. I can definitely see that resonating. In a way like it didn't hit us because we didn't come from that background, but I totally get that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yep. William writes, I wanted to real quickly mention something about the ending. I thought it was really interesting that you both chose to keep Chloe alive, and seemed to think that it was the more narratively satisfying choice. So I wonder if this colored your impressions of the ending a bit. But my understanding is that the frustration at the bury your gays trope comes because a lot of people see saving the town as the ending intended by the creators to be canonical, especially at the time the game was released, since that ending seems to be fleshed out a bit more. Also, I think the sense of doom at the end is supposed to imply that many people are going to die in the storm, even if that's unrealistic. So while you can choose to run off with Chloe, Danielle Riendo of Waypoint has talked about how that's her canonical ending, and she took the storm to be symbolic of a new beginning. A lot of people see it as the developers telling people that they can have the nice queer ending they hope for if they, the player, take on the burden of choosing the bad ending for the game / all of the other characters that we've met. So there's a bit of additional stress tax there for someone who was really hoping to see these young people be happy that I think is different than if that were just the default ending for the game. Anyway, I think as we're saying that despite some controversy, this game is extremely popular with queer folks and is generally well loved.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yep. Like it didn't, regardless of why, right, wrong, or whatever, when we got to the ending, it didn't feel, and again, it's just our perspective. Like I wasn't a different person when I played the game. Like I
No.
was me, and the me that played the game got to the end and didn't feel like that was the default right choice.
Yeah.
You know, and whether that was things that the game did or just my experience or my blood sugar levels when I played the game that morning, or whether I'd had my coffee yet, or any number of factors that caused that, it just didn't feel that way to me.
Yeah.
When I played it, you know, I recognize that. Like, I think that's a valuable perspective. I'm glad that you shared it. I'm interested in it. It just wasn't where I was when I did the final choice.
Yeah.
You know, and it's interesting. I think it says something about this game that, like, I have read both, right? Like I've seen Danielle talk about that before, and or heard about that, and saw those thoughts, and then also, you know, read a lot of discussion about this and found a wide variety of like perspectives on it.
Yeah.
On the stuff. But yeah, for me, it just didn't come off that way. And part of that's a limited perspective. That's part of privilege. And that was the me I had to play through the game.
Yeah.
You know,
blind spots and all.
Yeah, absolutely. Blind spots are a thing. And I'm never going to say that I don't have those.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
So, but I definitely understand that. Finally, Zach says via contact. Coming to Life is Strange as a queer person, I never really understood the uproar about the ending. The argument that sacrificing Chloe is the intended canon ending seemed to hinge on the fact that it's the longer of the two, but for me, saving Chloe is the only choice that makes any thematic sense. Throughout the story, Max uses her time travel powers in much the same way that I, or any teen, presumably would, as a way to navigate social situations flawlessly so as to avoid the embarrassment and pain that comes with being a teenager. In this light, her overall story is about learning that there's no way to truly live life without learning to accept the emotional pain of growing up. Once the queer subtext began to become clearer to me, I took the tornado as a physical manifestation of the pain and discomfort that she was avoiding in life, and most especially the fear of what would happen if she came out. As a young queer person, coming out can be terrifying. It can feel like it will destroy everything you know. In my mind, choosing the Save Arcadia Bay amounts to Max choosing not to learn from her experiences, turn, and run back to the life she knew. For me, the image of Max and Chloe staying together, facing the tornado, is the most important point in the game, and I can't imagine any other ending working on a thematic or emotional level.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I didn't come to it with the same experience, but that was closer to how I felt.
Same.
About the game. But we're not here to tell anybody how they felt about it was the wrong way.
Yeah.
Or that our way was the right way. It's just it was the way that we had.
Yeah. And it's a perk of the job that people can come to us and feel comfortable sharing these details
absolutely.
and these perspectives. I enjoy it. And I thank people, for, if they did have to exercise some patience with our kind of limited perspective in the episode, thank you for being patient with us and giving us a benefit of the doubt.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So thanks everybody. We have already done the admin thing. So just, the things to do.
Yeah.
Patreon ratings, reviews. We really do appreciate it. And we appreciate your support.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And until next time, good night.
Good night.